Can you hear that airplane
Oh yeah.
going by?
Mhm.
God, this damn thing's so sensitive.
Bringing to you the best stories from icons in the bourbon industry, it's Bourbon Pursuit. Now here are your hosts, Ryan and Kenny.
Welcome back to another episode of Bourbon Pursuit Podcast. I'm joined today with my co-host Ryan. How you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing well, Kenny. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We're actually going to be trying something new today. So we've been primarily going out and taking our laptops and our microphones with us to distilleries and all these people, but we've kind of outgrown that a little bit, right? So we are now expanding across the country, and we've actually reached out to a guest celebrity, I would say. So today on the podcast, we have Blake from Bourboner.com. And Blake, go ahead and introduce yourself and make sure I'm saying that. Is it Bourboner or Bourbonar.com? Like, how do you pronounce it?
Yeah, you had it right. Bourboner.com. Yeah, so there needs to be an E between the N and the R, but that domain was taken at the time, so it's
So it's kind of
Bourboner.com.
stuck.
But yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I
you've
think
you've built a pretty good brand name around it. I don't think it's worth changing anymore.
I think I do have the domain name now, but yeah, it was like, all right, I'm not gonna switch it over and change things up, and so but yeah, Bourboner.com. That's it.
Well, good. I mean, I'm very glad you're on the show today because you are probably by far you're a very big truth in the industry. You're easily one of the biggest bloggers out there on bourbon. So before we kind of get to talking about the website and how you've kind of grown that, let's talk about you a little bit. You know, where did you really get your start into bourbon?
I got into bourbon, and I was trying to think back last night. It was pretty late, probably around 2009, 2010-ish. Um, I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, so it's by no means a bourbon capital or anything like that. And just one of those things I really got interested in and just kind of dived in. And I have a tendency to over research any subject or hobby I have. Um, and it just kind of snowball effect after that. And just started digging in, and the site kind of came out of that. I was trying to keep track of my own reviews. Um, and so I had a site built that would just keep track of people's reviews and stuff. And that was the original Bourboner.com. And then I guess it was fall or late summer of 2013, I started the blog just as a way to start throwing posts up of things that I thought was interesting, and just different research that I had done. Uh, so after the blog got up, it kind of got some early traction with the Pappy release trackers and antique collection release trackers, and kind of been going that way ever since. It's kind of more of a blog now than even a site, but we do have a new app coming out, so that's pretty exciting too. But
Well,
yeah,
tell us a little bit about that new app. What's the new app going to be about? Or actually, I guess give us an explanation of the old app and the kind of two different parts of your website, and then kind of explain
mhm.
also what's going to be coming.
Yeah, so the current app and site, basically you can go on, add whatever reviews you have, add things to your My Whiskey page, just as a way to keep track of everything you drink. If you're at a bar and you have a flight of 5 things, you may not remember exactly each one of them. Um, and so that's what the current app and site has. But then with the new app, it's a lot more social. So think of it as like an Instagram with kind of a review layer on top of that. So if you just buy a bottle, want to show it off to people, other bourbon drinkers, you can do that. But then if you want to add reviews and everything, you can keep track of it as well within the app. So it should be interesting. There's a lot of sites where people like to share and talk about bourbon, and that probably takes a lot more of what people are doing than just adding reviews. So I think the social aspect is a big side of it, because you want to tell people how good it is and also show off the finds you get. So
No,
um,
definitely, I can see that. So, I guess have you seen sort of since you've seen the blog sort of grow a lot over time, and I know like I guess the app was kind of your first venture into it, or are you really thinking like this app is going to be something that you can put your staple on, say like this is what bourbon.com is all about, or do you think like, well, maybe it's all about the blog, right? I mean, you've got a good following there, so I guess you're just trying to figure out like where do you spend most of your time, trying to figure out what's going to be the best payoff at the end of the day, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of have a little bit of advantage since it's not a full-time gig. Once the blog started taking off, I started focusing, 90% of my bourbon time on that and 10% on the time. And that's kind of shifted back and forth a little bit. But the hope is that the app will take off as well. And then a little more time will be put towards that. But I think it's a great app. If other people don't like it, or, they're already happy with how they're keeping track of their stuff, that's fine. I'm happy to keep the blog going. So, I have a little bit of flexibility in there, but yeah, the hope is that the app will really do well and people will kind of come to it and really like it for what it is. So, but at the end of the day, you kind of go with what's working too. So the blog has been very good so far. And I enjoy doing it too. So you can't complain when you're writing and talking about bourbon.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Blake, what was that first bottle, I guess, that got you into, this bourbon habit or blogging and stuff?
I think it was probably, I want to say I had probably my first drink of bourbon was, I don't know how long ago, but it was probably Jim Beam. And I remember drinking it and thinking, this is the worst tasting thing I have, you're a teenager or whatever at the time, thinking, how in the world do people drink this stuff? It's fire. But then, your changes or your choices kind of improve and that kind of thing. And so Maker's Mark was probably the first actual bottle where I sat down and thought, there's some different flavors here that you don't taste in other stuff. And then it's, a big increase since then. And I actually still do like Maker's Mark and especially like their cast strength. But bourbon is such a broad category in itself.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to one of the articles you wrote about the evolutionary, I guess you could say the evolution of a bourbon drinker, right? I think we've all related to that. I know one of our first episode, we kind of hinted at that we've all kind of gone through that path as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I wrote that and it was a very personal step-by-step thing, but I know there's so many other people who had the exact same progression over the years. So it's kind of funny how everyone takes a very similar path in the bourbon game.
Especially when you read some things that are out there about people that have no idea what good bourbon is, and they're very immature and they don't really know what it is, and so they get a good bottle. Like, I mean, I think I read a story about 10 years ago. Somebody got a bottle of Pappy 20 and they thought it was garbage, so they just basically poured it down the drain, right? Because they didn't know any better, right? And it's one of those evolutionary things, because at the very, very early stages, you can't appreciate what a good bourbon is just because you haven't really had a chance to really experience all the different types that are actually out there.
That's very true. And you tell new guys, hey, don't chase after all these big, hard to find bottles. Just get a bunch of stuff that is available on the shelf first and figure out what you like, and then you can kind of go from there. People just take it as you're doing it so you have a better chance at getting those bottles. But if you tell 100 new guys not to buy Pappy Van Winkle, that's not increasing your chances by anything quantifiable. So, but
yeah, so I guess even when talking about Pappy, I mean, since you live in Jacksonville, it's not Kentucky by any means. Kentucky is absolutely crazy with the bourbon hunting around here. How's bourbon hunting in Jacksonville?
It's actually not bad. I'm kind of in a good middle ground. And maybe I shouldn't say this if there's going to be a bunch of Jacksonville listeners. Yeah, no, but I'm kind of in a good middle ground of there's enough. Like Jacksonville is a fairly big city. There's over 1 million people, so we're going to get distribution of the majority of good bottles and a decent amount of it. But there's not as many bourbon hunters, and it's kind of picking up now. But the Jacksonville, or kind of the elite bourbon levels like the Pappies and antique collections, those kind of things, there's not a whole lot of us chasing after them. Now everyone's after Pappy now, but this year I'll walk into a store and see a stag that was sitting on the shelf for maybe a month, which that seems
That's
like not a
crazy,
long
Lucky.
time, but that's forever.
insane.
And yeah. So it's not bad. You can still get the majority of what you want, and I probably put a lot more time into it than I should as well.
We all
But
say that.
and by this time I know a fair amount of store owners in Jacksonville just because I'm in talking with them, buying from them, that kind of stuff.
Is it
So that
ABC in Jacksonville too?
yes, yeah. So they're by far the biggest in the state of Florida, but they only do lotteries on Pappy Van Winkle and William LaRue Weller. So a year and a half later, I've still never won that lottery.
It's
But
that's the way it goes.
yeah, yeah, that's what do you do? I can't accuse them of rigging a randomization of picking
Yeah,
bottles. So
I like the Florida liquor stores or ABC. I was down in Naples a couple weeks ago and walked in, and there he goes, Weller 12, like just sitting there, and I'm like, I hit the Mecca. And so me and
yeah,
my buddy
yeah.
just shipped, bought 6 or 7 bottles and shipped them back home because of you and your poor man's Pappy post. I can never find Weller anymore. So
I
thank
think
you
I
for
was just
that.
jumping on a wave that was already starting with that poor man's Pappy post, and it's actually to be technically correct. It's the straight bourbon blend, or I don't know. I used to get a bunch of comments about guys in straight bourbon, which was where I first read about it, saying that I was stealing it. I'm like, I'm not stealing it. There's nobody who I can cite for it. I can't even cite an entire forum for, but yeah,
Well,
ABC. I think it's public knowledge now, but they're the only ones who can sell the Weller line in Florida, so they get a
Oh,
lot
wow.
of it.
Right.
yeah, so
Yeah,
we brought up Poor Man's Pappy. So I guess for all the reader or all the listeners out there who have never heard of it before, give us what is Poor Man's Pappy.
yeah. So Poor Man's Pappy is a blend of 60%. Hold on, am I 60% Weller 12 and 40% Weller Antique, and it comes out to around 107 proof. And Weller Antique used to be, well, it's not age dated anymore, so, but around the 7 to 8 year mark now. And then Weller 12 is obviously 12 years. And so the blend gives you something very similar to like an old Rip Van Winkle 10 year. Originally, it was for the Weller Centennial, which was a 10 year, 100 proof bourbon, but it's been discontinued.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part of the reason of calling it Poor Man's Pappy on my blog was no one knows what Weller Centennial is for the most part.
So
Yeah.
how did you actually learn about it? I mean, I guess you kind of hinted at it, but where did you
Yeah,
find
it was
that
from
nugget of knowledge?
yeah, from straight bourbon. And that's the thing about the blog too, is just taking a lot of good information that's kind of in the archives of all these bourbon forums and putting it in a little more presentable manner. Or, you can research a lot of stuff there. I've seen Julian Van Winkle popping up and commenting on stuff that people are questioning, what's the source of this? Well, then Julian Van Winkle's in
Mm-hmm.
Straight Bourbon talking about, oh yeah, here's the source. So there's a lot. That's where I originally got the Poor Man's Pappy from. But that's I think that originally started with like a Kentucky bar started doing it. So I do a lot of reading, and a lot of my reading is bourbon reading as well. So trying to remember exactly where I got things from is not always easy.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
that's I guess another good thing to ask you is with you say you do a lot of reading, but you also have pretty much a lot of interesting articles that are on your site. You become the staple. It's known as a lot of truth behind different kind of bourbons, such as the Pappy Van Winkle laser codes, the secrets behind mash bills, the cheat sheets that are always out there. So I guess where do you kind of come up with these ideas? Because you're a pretty frequent poster too. It's at least one post every week, and it's quality stuff too. So where do these ideas kind of spawn from?
it just it's things that I've run across that I've had trouble with myself over the years, or just talking with other guys. And I kind of keep uh, an Apple Notes or Evernote notes in my phone of like, oh, that'd be cool. I should write about that. And just kind of, as I go throughout the day, just write things down and then find time here and there to start writing. I have a young son, so he goes to bed early. My wife usually goes to bed early, and I'm like, well, I've got 2 hours to sit around now. I guess I can write some bourbon post.
There you go.
Put all that knowledge to
Yeah,
use.
it's just yeah. A collection of a lot of different places is where the ideas come from, but a lot of it's just I know I can't remember all the different proofs of Elijah Craig barrel proof myself. So I'm like, oh, well, here, I'll just put them all on one sheet. I'm like, oh, this would be a pretty cool post. I bet other people would like to do this. I'll just put pictures with it. And then that's kind of the evolution of a bourboner post. Just from a small idea and then kind of expanding on it. You know, some posts, I'll think about it. I'll write it in 30 minutes and I probably should proof it more than I do. And it'll go up. And then other posts, I'll just kind of write on for a month or so and they'll kind of change as I go.
Yeah, I mean, you're very right about that presentable format, because you look at Straight Bourbon and you look at these other bourbon forums. Yeah, I mean, they're forums you got to register for, and then you got to, if you want to find information, you got to dig down into the archives of 2008, and even some of the stuff in there isn't even relevant anymore because they say, well, don't buy that, just spend $20 more and go buy a Pappy 20, which we all know is not possible anymore. So it's definitely a good way that you present it in such a way that it's easily Google searchable, so anybody that can get it gets it quickly. So it's a very, very fantastic way of being able to distribute that information.
Yeah, I Googled Pappy earlier and Poor Man's Pappy popped up. It was like the first three posts. So that
I think at one point I had 3 or 4 links in the first page for Pappy Van Winkle. I don't know if that's still the case, but
yeah, they'll get you on that SEO stuff, that search engine optimization.
Yeah, that's beyond my. The only thing I know about SEO is just write content that people want to read. That's as far as I've gotten.
I'm sure as soon as they launched that clothing brand, your sites just went right off the front page of Google. So
yeah, that's the joys of having Julian Van Winkle backing your company, I guess, when you have Pappy Co.
So kind of talking a little bit more about the Poor Man's Pappy. You also do a few different posts about vatting and experimentation and mixing bourbons. Is that something that you do regularly and try to talk about, or what's kind of your kind of process behind all that?
Yeah, so that's I think kind of the high school level science projects are something that are just fun to me. So I'll do a couple of those posts every now and then, and I'm kind of constantly doing that kind of stuff. I have infused bourbon, vanilla bean bourbon, I think an orange peel and cinnamon infused bourbon that I'm doing now. That's just stuff I like to do, and I find it interesting. So then I turn it into a post. I did a post about the blended bourbon hyper decanting. That was a big thing with wine a few years ago, whenever Nathan Myhrvold's book came out. So I thought, well, yeah, this probably applies to bourbon too. So I did a testing, and I don't know if it's a placebo effect or what, but it was blind, but there's only 3 choices, and the one that was actually blended in a magic bullet won or was picked as the best by 3 different people. So I'm like, well, maybe there is something to it. So I don't know if scientifically there's actually some science and proof behind that, but on a surface level of, hey, let's try this. This sounds cool. Yeah,
it's funny. It actually went in a magic bullet. I guess that kind of just goes against the regular old, well, just pour a few different things in the decanter and kind of see what happens here in a few weeks.
Yeah, I have a friend in Bardstown. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say I have a friend in Bardstown that every good bottle of bourbon he has, he puts one shot from it when he opens it up in a decanter, and it's built up since 1983. And so every time he takes a drink, he adds a new shot of bourbon. So Me and
Huh.
Kenny and I thought about starting that ourselves and seeing how that
I'm
goes.
probably gonna steal that. I'm gonna start doing that. I have like a little bit over 2 drinks of poor man's Pappy left in my decanter now. I may empty it and start doing that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty
But
neat, especially after 20 years. I wonder how it'll
yeah,
meld together.
yeah. And the whole vatting thing is just really interesting too, just to see how it gives you a little bit of perspective of what they're doing at the distillery to pull all these different barrels and mix flavor profiles.
Yeah,
Obviously, they're working with all the same mash bills.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, you're definitely right about that. I also kind of almost take like maybe a almost I don't want to say anti-stance, right? But there's always got to play somebody has to play the devil's advocate because if you think
yeah,
about it, it's like a chef makes you a steak and he brings it out, presents it to you, and you just say, well, where's that Heinz 57? I can pour
Where's the A1?
yeah, we're gonna pour ketchup all over this thing, right? And so I guess there's actually there's always two different arguments because you could think like, well, this is the way that it was intended to be consumed, but then there's also the thing of well, we might discover something that nobody else has. So I've even seen one vatting where somebody actually took a shot from Thomas H. Handy and a shot from the Baby Sazerac and mixed them together because it's the same mash bill, just a little bit different aged. And actually, it's about aged the
yeah.
same closely, but
It's pretty
different.
similar age.
Yeah,
Yes,
different proof levels. And so he just kind of just did it as a little experiment. But these are the things that you just got to try out to kind of figure out what you like.
we should probably put a rule on how expensive the bottle can be before you can decant it. Anything below
Yeah,
$40 is allowed to be vatted and everything else.
yeah. Batting a $90 bottle of bourbons doesn't seem
Yeah,
very
yeah.
cost effective.
No, no, not at all.
So what are the other
So
things that you have on your website? Are these the Pappy and the BTAC trackers?
Uh-huh.
I've used them constantly, especially this year and last year during the hunts that go on because it's a good indication, especially the past 2 years. Because I think you started in 2013. Is that about the time you started it?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's because really at that point, if you think about it, if you just do this like another 3 or 4 more years, we're going to have all the data we need that we don't need to look at the map anymore because we're going to actually have a good kind of like 2 week span. We're going to know when it's going to hit our state or our city or anything like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, I think it's a good idea because it helps all those hunters out there kind of know like, well, it's been released, it's coming out there. I don't need to hear on the grapevine from my Uncle Sam who talked to his cousin Charlie who knows from their dog that talked to whomever that it's on the West Coast or the East Coast or whatever. So if you've never been to Bourbon.com, you've never seen those, and you're going to start thinking about hunting in the spring and for fall, make sure you look at Bourbon.com and make sure you pay attention to those tracker maps because they're updated almost daily. And how do you update those?
Very manually. I have a Microsoft Paint map that I use, and
Sounds
just
very, very technical.
sounds
yeah, it's
antiquated.
very technical, and yeah, no, it's something I probably need to improve on. But yeah, it's just pretty much me. People send me emails. I have a couple different sources now that I get information from, and yeah, just updating it in the blogs and WordPress. So it takes about 30 seconds to do once somebody tells me where it's been released. But yeah, it's definitely a beginner step. But it's kind of nice to figure out how the release is going across the country too. And then you get people who say that it's only flippers use it and that kind of stuff, which, I don't know how you stop that. There's still plenty of people using it that want to buy it and drink it. So
I mean, you
we'll
got to
keep
think
doing
about
it.
it. If you're waiting for that map to get populated before you're going out and looking, odds are you're not going to find it
Yeah.
anyway because
Yeah.
it's probably already hit and it's probably already
Yeah.
gone. So it always just goes back to making those connections with family, friends, and liquor store owners to try to get those bottles you really, really want, and knowing when to, if you need to camp out, go ahead and doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of, it really depends on the state. Like, take Florida, for instance. As soon as Miami hits, I know I have about 10 to 14 days for Jacksonville to hit on any major bourbon release. So if, I was watching the map and I saw that Florida hit, I'd say, okay, now I know. But, sometimes they like to throw things up. I think it was Pennsylvania this year who they didn't release until like after Christmas or something, which
Yeah,
was
it's
almost
about
3
a week
weeks
before.
behind last year. And yeah, so there's still a few states that try to change things up, but like you said, really your best bet is to get a connection with a store owner and kind of play that angle. People like to reward their good customers still, so that's usually your best bet.
Hmm.
Um, Now you may have to spend a lot to become a good customer, and I wouldn't suggest doing it at like a one of the big box retailers because they've got guys buying like $50,000 in wine every year that they're trying to keep happy. Not a guy who buys $500 in bourbon. So,
You're right.
but they're a fun thing to do. It's a fun thing to kind of have some excitement around the fall release season every year. So, yeah, kind of keeping them going for now.
So let's
I
talk.
just let Kenny. I was just gonna say I just let Kenny do all the hunting, and then I get to reap the rewards
They
of
just show
his
up
hard,
and yeah.
yeah, of all his hard work. Let you
Uh,
guys go out there and fight each other for it.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's
like my brother.
it's 8 p.m. I'm standing in line. Where are you? Oh, okay. Well, I'll be there in a few hours. Just save my spot.
So you
Yeah,
got my spot? Yeah.
Exactly. That's what it's like. So let's talk about your collection. So if you've got this blog and you've got all kind of tasting notes and you've got your whiskey cabinet, virtual whiskey cabinet on Bourbon.com. So what does the physical cabinet look like? Like how many bottles do you think you have kind of stashed away?
The physical collection is a bit spread out in my house, and as my son gets older, is getting more and more secure. Um, we have a buffet in our living or our dining room that I have probably 30 bottles in, and then our spare bedroom closet that probably has, oh geez, I don't know if I want to make this number public.
Don't do
No,
it then.
it's not as bad compared to a lot of guys I've seen, but it's kind of like um, the drug addict or the addicted gambler saying losing $1 million isn't as bad as losing $100,000.
Hmm.
But probably another 90 to 100 bottles in I've got a bookshelf that I keep in a spare bedroom. So yeah, several years back. The problem now isn't the open bottles. I'll drink a quarter of a bottle and then I have something new to try. Well, then that quarter bottle or that 3/4 full bottle just gets left behind. Um, so at some point, I think I'm coming to a spot now where I need to stop buying full bottles, just try to get samples and that kind of stuff whenever there's new releases. Um, but yeah, it's a growing collection and it rapidly grows if you're not careful.
Yeah, I mean, I think
yeah.
that's one thing we've all had to learn is to maybe keep an Excel spreadsheet of what you're actually spending.
Yeah, I did that for all my fall purchases, and it's a good thing and a bad thing. You want to look and know exactly how much you're spending, but then when you look at it, you're like, oh shoot, I probably shouldn't be spending this money.
And definitely,
It,
definitely don't tell your wife about it.
Yeah, I'm not telling her about this podcast because we did a bottle count one time, and it wasn't a good conversation after that.
what's the saying? If you can measure it, then you can manage it. So if you
Yeah,
measure it, you
yeah,
got to
that's,
manage your
that's a good
problem.
point. That's a good point. Yeah,
What were some
the
of your?
thing is, if you go hunting a lot, it's like, all right, I can't walk into 20 different stores and then just walk out because they don't have anything I'm interested in. So I would, if I'm going to a bunch of stores, I may grab a bottle of baby Saz here and there, or something like that, or an Elmer T. Lee if they have it. Um, and those bottles started to collect over time. So started giving them away as gifts.
There you go.
People are
What
happy
were
with bourbon.
what were some of your favorite releases from 2014?
Really, the best one to me was the Stag. It was, I thought it was excellent this year. And I'm say that as a Stag fan, and you can kind of go back to a lot of previous years. Some of the other ones I thought were good. I thought the Michter's Toasted Barrel was good.
I love that also. It was
Yeah,
awesome.
they didn't seem like got a lot of attention, but I really liked it. Let's see what else. I like a sweeter bourbon, which is probably why I like Buffalo Trace stuff a lot. But then the High West, the Midwinter's Dram, that was good. It's expensive, but I thought it was good. I like how a bunch of different people are doing finishing cask stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
what
there's
was some
definitely a
other?
lot of experimentation going on with a lot of different distilleries that, as you've probably found out through all your poking and prodding, they don't like to really hand out a lot of information of what they're trying out.
No, no, they're pretty tight-lipped when it comes to that kind of stuff, and I've done my best to poke and prod, as you said. Um, but they the funny ones are they'll have the cola registration through the TTB for a logo or a label, and then you go to ask them about it, and the answer is, well, just because we get that approved doesn't mean we're going to release it. And like, well, I mean, it sounds like you're going to release it, so could you give me some information about it, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of
But
interesting how you just had that post. What was it? Even this week or last week about very old Saint Nick coming out with basically
yeah,
making a reappearance, and you just kind of dug around and kind of found that out. What was the kind of process to figure that one out?
a lot of Google searching. I've become pretty good at Google searching. Yeah, you do site searches for where you think information is going to be, and then just kind of uh, a large database of reading over the past 5 years. You kind of remember stuff here and there, and that helped. But yeah, that's another interesting one because it sounds like it's going to be a U.S. release, but her labels were wrong, which is another big problem. Kind of the whiskey industry is facing today. People aren't putting the correct labels on there. You know that those things needed to be age stated and needed the state of distillation in them, but it didn't. It just said bottled and produced in California, and there's some thing about how they use small barrels or something. But the TTB is pretty clear about that. That it needs to say distilled in with the state if it's not California. Um, so yeah, just
Yeah, and a lot of people are getting in trouble for that now. I
yeah,
see like where
definitely.
Angel Zivvy and a couple others are getting filed lawsuits against.
Yeah, there's several like Tito's was a big one for the vodka category. Then Angel's Envy, they have one now. And then obviously Templeton was a big one too,
Hmm.
which it's kind of like who can wash their hands faster in these things because the TTB they approve them, but they're not really digging in to make sure everything is correct on the label. And then the label or the brand is saying, well, the TTB approved it. Our TTB rep said it was fine.
Yeah,
So
and 3 or 4 years ago, nobody probably would even cared, right? It's just I think
no,
this this
no,
this huge boom, everybody starts to really pay attention to these small, minute details, and are very easy to critique people when it's not the way that it's presented.
yeah, that's
But
very true. And kind of the new line of consumers, they want as much information about a product as they possibly can, where that wasn't necessarily the case um, before. You know, now I'm looking at what barrel charred distilleries use and where it was
Bunch
sourced
of
from. If they're
numbers.
not yeah, just all this crazy information that a few years ago nobody released or only a select few cared to know what it was. But
hmm
kind of the new bourbon generation that's coming up
yeah,
is
because I mean,
really interested in
if
that kind of stuff.
because wine pretty much does that, right? I mean, they'll say it's aged in this warehouse and this facing this it's facing the east in the
Yeah,
mid
the grapes are in
afternoon,
this
and
valley and gets
Yeah,
the dew and all this
yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Yeah, I think that's why the
Um,
bourbon industry, I guess it's unique and why it's probably so popular is because that's the stories and all the details and all the craft that goes into it. It really appeals, I guess, to our generation because we're always seeking out, like all that information and the stories.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, all the kind of the handmade, made in America movements combining into what bourbon is, which is on top, it's a great product. So it's interesting to see how that takes over. A distiller who's actually really good about that and does about that as much as the wine producers would is Four Roses. They put warehouse, which level, how many barrels deep it was. They put which side of the warehouse was on the west, was on the Sippin' Corn has a post on his blog that lets you decipher what or where exactly that barrel was, which is really interesting because you kind of just look at those labels and think, oh, it's a bunch of numbers. It's probably just marketing, but there's actually a reason for them. So that's made me an even bigger Four Roses fan than I already was. So
imagine how deep that Excel spreadsheet might be.
Oh, dude, yeah, no, I could. That's the kind of stuff where I'm like, I don't know who keeps this database, but hopefully they know what the Microsoft Access or.
Yeah. Let's hope they're not using that for any other tech geeks out there. But we're reaching the 36-minute mark of this podcast. Blake, I hope you're going to be able to come on the show again because this has definitely been very interesting to talk to you, and I know we could probably just have you on to just shoot around and kind of just talk about all the industry news that's happening. But I guess before we hang up, give us just a little kind of warmer teaser. Is there anything else, besides the new Bourboner.com app that's kind of happening for 2015 or anything you kind of see on the horizon?
Bourboner app is the biggest thing, so be on the lookout for that. I got the final version to my phone this morning, so hopefully another couple weeks of just getting some other guys to run through it. And then we'll be launching. So be on the lookout for that. I'll have a promo coming with it of a couple free bottles. So should be good. I'm thinking maybe a Stag or a Old Rip 10-year or something like that.
If you just said free bourbon, I don't think you're gonna have a problem getting some people to try it.
Yeah. That's what I'm hoping. I had to go through some legal hoops to make sure that it's okay to give away free bourbon. It won't be coming from me personally, but I will be paying it on your behalf. So
smart move.
Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate it. Really enjoyed it. Love to come on anytime you'll have me. So
appreciate it.
Awesome.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. And Ryan, anything else to add before we close out?
No, just thanks again, Blake, and any suggestions, feedback, and comments the listeners have, we'd appreciate it just to know how we do.
Thanks, guys.